Hello and welcome to our Lunch and Learn webinar, Strategic Market Expansion in GovCon. My name is Mary Ann Brown, Senior Director of Operations at Forum. Today's event is scheduled from 12 until 1 and will be recorded. The recording will be distributed following the event along with the slides. Just a few things to keep things moving slowly today. If you experience any technical issues or have any questions during the program, just reach out to me through the chat and I'll be happy to assist you. And we want today's event to be interactive. So if you have any questions for today's speakers at any point, just put them in the Q&A and they will address them throughout the event. Now, I would like to introduce you to today's host of the event, AO.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on your geographic location. My name is Akiwande Oshodi, also known as AO, my initials. I'm the president and founder of the Avery Group. But more importantly, I'm also the president of NCMA Atlanta. First and foremost, I want to thank G2X. I want to thank some of our partners, NCMA Metro Maryland, as well as NCMA River Region, for collaborating with us on our Home and Away series. Myself and the president of Metro Maryland came up with this idea to train small businesses and industry on how best to navigate the current climate. So I wanted to say thank you for joining. Thank you for investing in yourselves. And we want to make sure this is an engaging session. If you're new to the NCMA community, it is a really tight-knit community. Introduce yourself in the chat, say hello, give an interesting fact about yourself, like where you're from, or what your business does, because it's all about engagement. Really appreciate this opportunity today. And we will be introducing the team. I'll kick it off first. My name is, before we introduce the team, sorry about that. I want to really run through the agenda. This agenda is jam-packed with information, stemming from my personal experience and how I've leveraged some of the tools that we'll discuss today to win opportunities. We'll talk about pre-award protests. We'll talk a little bit about how to identify and shape opportunities all the way to a contract award and contract win. And then we'll talk a little bit about pre-solicitation best practices from an experienced contracting officer. Now I'd like to introduce this esteemed panel. Today's speakers, I introduce myself, Akiwande Oshodi, also Shamari Wade. He's a shareholder at Greenberg and Tark. Alexa Choi, COO of G2X. And Ms. Brittany Jenkins, procurement analyst for Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves and give us a fun fact. Please let us know when the last time you did something for the first time. Shamari?
Thanks, AO. I appreciate that. I have to think about the last time I did something first time. I'll come back to that one. But by way of introduction, again, my name is Shamari Wade. I've been practicing government contracts law for about almost 20 years now. My practice includes everything from small business work, which is really near and dear to my heart, and I'll tell you why in a minute, all the way up to the Fortune 50 companies. I have a full service practice, includes bid protests, terminations, claims, small business compliance. Ethics was always important in the government contracts. But by way of just very quick background, I'm a Navy brat. My dad retired as Master Chief and he became a proposal manager after his time in the military. And so I kind of grew up editing proposals and proofreading. And after he was done with the service, he became an 8A contractor and did that for 9 years and did full for another 15 years. So I've seen it from both the legal side as well as the business side. So I like offering pragmatic advice and certainly understand that it's a challenging industry, but rewarding as well. Alexa, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm Alexa Choi. Thank you so much, AO, for correctly pronouncing my last name, Chief Operating Officer of G2X. And when was the last time I did something for the first time? Boy, I was sitting here thinking, I was like, what a question. So this is a good one. And I was going to say that I went skydiving, but that was not my first time, but I went skydiving with somebody from industry. And he flew in with his friend who owns a plane, and we skydived together with my nephew who turned 21. So like usually I keep those kind of like random weird things just like off the radar of the whole GovCon industry. But this time I told him we were doing it, and he flew in and met us, and we jumped together, and he was like right in front of me. And I think having him on the airplane with me made me like a lot calmer because, I was like, I can jump out of a plane, no problem. Then when you get in the plane, it's a whole other story. So I'm happy to be here today. I promise that this will not be as nerve-wracking as jumping out of a plane. It's going to be a lot of good info. It'll be fun. And I will pass it over to Brittany.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Such exciting first-time stories. I'm learning so much about you guys already. Again, my name is Brittany Jenkins. As it says on the slide, procurement analyst, what is that, right? I'm a warranty contracting officer, but my day-to-day duties involve doing the policy reviews and compliance for my organization, which is Air Force Lifecycle Management Center. I support the PEO BES, Business and Enterprise Systems, here at Gunter Air Force Base, if you're familiar with that. Primarily what we deal with is IT services and some products as well. I am also the Vice President of the NTMA River Region chapter here in Montgomery, Alabama. Let's see, a fun fact about me. I don't know how fun it is, but I'm terrified of dogs. Small, little, medium. Don't tell me, no, I don't have a dog, but then you really have this little poodle when I show up to your house. That's a dog. I'm scared of it. A first time thing, I visited the Dominican Republic for the first time a month ago. That's really all I got, AL. You should have given me some notice. I could have come up with some really creative things here. That's all I got.
Thank you, Brittany, and thank you, panel. Thank you, speakers. So clearly, I like a little bit of impromptu-ness, if that's a word. So I appreciate you guys indulging me on the fly. So a little bit about me. I've worked in multiple facets. I was in the military for about 15 years, where I was a federal financial manager. I was a contract specialist and supported signal operations. I've worked at large prime companies like PwC and Guidehouse, delivering on contracts. And now I'm a small business owner. And I'm here to share a little bit of my experiences and what I've found important to gaining some traction in the government contracting space. I had a business before I started the Avery Group. It was called Hunter Strategies. And I had just left the military, and I thought I knew everything I needed to know to be successful. And I realized I knew a lot about nothing. So this is a lot. This slide is really a lot about my experience and what I feel is keys to positioning before the solicitation comes out. And that's really education and engagement. Education comes in multiple facets and forms, right? It's not just formal education like sitting in a college campus or sitting in a training that's going to give you CPEs. It could be webinars such as this forum. You can go to how to do business sessions with various agencies to tell you what type of services and how they procure those services and goods. Various podcasts. I know G2 Exchange has a podcast. Game Changers with Mike Lejeune is a really great podcast, and so many other different mediums. Various protest documents. You'd be very surprised in what you can find out in protests and OIG reports and various strategic plans to understand exactly how the agency you're targeting is looking for solutions. Industry newsletters. One, again, is G2X. It seems to be a really, really great growth platform. And also, as you're doing interviews with incumbent staff, candidate interviews. You can learn a lot about how the incumbent, how they delivered, what the client landscape is like, what the agency is really looking for. And the second piece is engagement. And that's one of the main reasons why I joined NCMA Atlanta, right? It's one of those trade organizations that actually gives you both things. It gives you education and engagement with various industry days, conferences, webinars such as this one. But also it gives you resources to individuals that are actually procuring goods and services on behalf of the federal government. It gives you insight into how to market to them, how to speak to them, what language do they understand, so you guys can come to a commonality and you can win work from an industry perspective. LinkedIn is a really great tool. It gives you an opportunity to gain education, various market intelligence. I know Alexa is a really great influencer. I think a GovCom influencer on LinkedIn, and other people such as Stephen Coprince. And last but not least, RFIs. And I want to spend a little time about RFIs because, Alexa really wanted me to speak on this. And I was a little confused and wanted to understand why. And the reason she gave me was that RFIs, a lot of people don't really submit RFIs because they feel like it's a waste of time. And I was, just like this kid here on my lower right, I was confused, I was perplexed because we've actually won work through responding to RFI and actually grown contracts from an initial RFI. Our first VA Prime contract was actually in response to a data science RFI. We had capability, we had familiarity with the customer, not the direct customer, but we wanted to expand our footprint within the VA. We responded to the RFI. We talked a little bit about our capabilities. We even mentioned how we should shape it. So to be honest, it's free marketing. RFIs are a great way to engage with your potential customers, get to understand what their pain points are, do some research as you're writing your RFI as to what the agency is looking for. Next, it helps shapes the government acquisition strategy. We're on GSA Mass. I think because we were very technical in our RFI, they felt that Mass would be the best avenue, but we also recommended the multiple award schedule, as well as the specific sin it should be under. Right, so we're helping the government and the contracting officer shape the acquisition strategy, which is very, very important to limit competition. And in this market, limited competition is key to be successful. And then it also helps you develop a relationship with the buyer. Even if you don't do anything with the RFI, you're able to, it's your first, but we talked about free marketing earlier, but it's your first instance to say hello to the customer because they know that you're invested in their solution, their organization, but there may be downstream work that may be coming out. So understand, going through that RFI process has multiple instances of value, relationship building, education, and engagement. Now, when we win our first contract, when we win our contracts, we're like this young lady jumping for joy, but the work isn't done there, right? There's a lot of different things that need to occur. And when you win the contract is just the beginning, because typically it costs 5 times as much to acquire a new customer than to retain an existing one. So what inside sales means to me is really on contract growth. And how do we achieve on contract growth? I mentioned that we won an opportunity leveraging a response to an RFI. Once we were into that customer, now we started empowering our team, right? We started giving them the confidence to build relationships with the customer, be empathetic to the customer's needs, values, mission, vision, and goals to help align our team with our customer. Then also create a culture of proactivity, right? We are reaching out to the customer before they reach out to us. We're delivering things ahead of schedule. We're continuously being curious and asking questions because those questions help us understand what type of impact we're creating, where we can add additional value, or where there may be gaps in the organization meeting their goals. One of the sales books I've read was always focused on looking at a customer's afflictions, which means their pain points, right? As well as the things that they admire, that they want to achieve. Once you're able to understand both, right, it helps you create, it helps you create and shape opportunities. So the more intelligence you gather, the more you're able to inform your proposal as you're deciding to write it in the solicitation phase. And all we want to think about is winning, following the various steps to continue on contract growth, win again, leverage that past performance, continue the same steps on contract growth, and win some more for scalability. Any questions? I don't know if somebody's throwing anything in the chat.
Ew, I don't see any questions in the chat.
Okay, awesome. And I forgot to even say when the last time I did something for the first time. So I've been hurt for the last 2 years, and I recently ran 2 miles with my 7-year-old son. That's always been a dream of mine. I did that, I want to say, a week and a half ago. So it was a great experience. Thank you.
Ayo, are you recovered yet after your run, or?
I'm recovered, but my son was kicking my butt. I'll say that. Next, we're going to hand it over to Shamari.
Thank you, Ayo. Appreciate it. Great insight.
Give me 1 second, Shamari, to get on the
Sure.
right slide for you. Sorry
Yeah.
about that, team.
Of course, no problem at all. And I was thinking, I think I was the first up for Ayo's question as well. So if I were to, I have done skydiving, Alexa, and that it was years ago, and I definitely won't do it again. But on my first one, something recent, I am I'm a girl dad, and my daughter is really into dance, so I'm learning a lot about ballet and all that, which is pretty cool actually. So it's great phase of life. On to pre-award protests. So like I said, guys, I have a lot of experience, and this is an area that's near and dear to my heart. And I see a lot of small businesses and even large businesses get tripped up here. And so I could spend an hour, maybe 2, just on this. But I will respect the other panelists. I know we have a compressed schedule, but I do want to just go over some high-level things to think about. Like I mentioned before, my dad was proposal manager going up, and so I know how much investment is when you are going after these opportunities. So you have to be very careful in terms of what you go after and make sure that you get an ROI. So that's why these pre-award protests are so important. So as you go through a potential RFP that just hit the street, think of a few things, and these are sort of popular protest grounds that have some good chances of success. The first is making sure that the RFP is compliant with law and regulation. If you see something that's an LPTA, keep in mind that not everything can be a lowest price technically acceptable. So to the extent that you see the spec and it's not consistent, that's a great protest ground. Same thing with commercial item contracts. Not everything's a commercial item. Some things are not customary in the commercial market. So if you see maybe 80% is commercial, but the other part is not, that's something that could certainly be a ground for a protest. Small business set aside, did the government follow the rule of 2? If not, that could be something that could be challenged through pre-award. Patent versus latent ambiguities are something that's a very common area as well. So a patent ambiguity is something that's obviously wrong on its face. It's something you're looking at the RFP and if something's really wrong, you have to challenge that before the RFP is due. Conversely, there's also something called a latent ambiguity, and that's where essentially 2 reasonable people could see things differently. So I had one protest a few years ago where a client was unsuccessful. They offered Microsoft certification, and their key personnel got certified through an updated Microsoft certification program that included SharePoint. The RFP only assumed that it was you can only get certified through an old Microsoft certification. So that was sort of a classic latent ambiguity. And we were successful because we convinced the GAO that there were two reasonable ways to get that key personnel certified. So you don't want to rely on that. That's sort of like something you don't want to say, oh, if we're unsuccessful, we could just do the latent ambiguity argument. It's better to get some clarification up front. Unduly restrictive terms are another thing you really want to be looking out for. So if you see any terms that really favor the incumbent, if you see key personnel that are very attenuated, say they want a computer scientist with 25 years experience that does cartwheels, whatever else, say, hey, well, that's in a small market for even harder. They won't allow you to fairly compete. That could be a really good ground for challenge. And past performance is another popular one. We have a engineering firm that designs commercial aircraft hangars. They were considering doing a proposal for a RFP that was doing military hangars, and the past performance called for military hangars. That, if you sort of peel back the layers, a hangar is a hangar for this in this instance. And so we did a pre-award protest and were successful and got our client an opportunity to bid on the work. So again, those are some others. Some other ones, but they're just, again, I always say generally kind of trust your gut in terms of looking at these the RFP and seeing if you have a real fair shot to compete. Marianne, next slide, please. All right. So choosing a form and deadlines, another really, really important part here, and this is something I really want to convey to this audience. So we have three core forums, and I'll talk about the SBA toward the end. The agency protest is kind of the most informal. I have the site there, FAR 33103. Let's take a look at that. One important thing, and I look forward to Brittany's comments as well, but the government does encourage dialogue. They want to hear from industry. So even in the agency protest, it presupposes a frank conversation with a contracting officer in the government before the protest route. So don't think that there's a sort of hard firewall necessarily when these RFPs come out. And to AO's point too about even our RFIs, the government wants to learn the what industry is doing and what the capabilities are. So the pros here for agency protests are they're typically pretty fast. The FAR says around 35 days. They're also less formal, so you're not gonna, you're not. Some clients even do it on their own, but you don't need like a really formulaic form to file a protest. The cons is maybe hard to get an objective review. You're essentially telling the government that they're wrong. It's almost like for those of us who are married, it's like asking your significant other to be jury, judge, and executioner. So you may not get a fair shake if there's a dispute. But you do have certain remedies. You can appeal to GAO or the Court of Federal Claims more likely than not, provided that it's timely. The GAO, the Government Accountability Office, is the most popular forum. To creature Congress, you'll have an attorney advisor, and the pros there, you get a objective review, because it's the most popular bid protest forum. They see a large volume. You more likely to get a detailed analysis from your protest, and you do have the benefit of having a stay of award. Some people put agency protests also having stay of award, but it's a little tricky, and I'll get to that a little later. But I would caution about assuming that there'd be a stay of award from the agency side. On the GAO, the cons, it's a little more formal. The costs do go up because it's you like to have to get lawyers involved, And there are limited discoveries. Sometimes we fight on with the agency lawyers on discovery. But keep in mind here that the agency, the same contracting officer you may have an issue with, their attorneys are involved now. And so you're still kind of dealing with the same folks that you may have had an issue with before. Again, it is appealable, so you can go to the Court of Federal Claims to the extent you have a disappointed decision. And the last common option is the Court of Federal Claims, and their jurisdictions found in the Tucker Act. So pros, to the extent it is a pros, it's more formal. So these are judges, they have 15-year terms. Some have been on the bench since the mid-'80s. They've seen everything. The other benefit, unlike GAOs, you have a separate attorney involved. So the Department of Justice will represent the government in a Court of Federal Claims protest. And so sometimes you never know, the DOJ will take a look at the record and they'll say, hey, I'm not defending this. I'm not going to court to get yelled at by a judge. Agency figure this out. You never know. But I found them to be pretty impartial, and they do a good volume of protest as well. So you get a good perspective there. And the other benefit is you get detailed discovery, so it's really hard to hide the ball in a administrative record for the Court of Federal Claims. The cons is expensive. You're having it's a longer process, more attorney's fees, and you don't have an automatic stay. Now, you normally, in my experience, get a voluntary stay, and so the government will agree not to award the contract. But if they push back on that, then you have to get a separate restraining order, or temporary restraining order, or preliminary injunction to enjoin the government from moving forward with the evaluation. I want to make sure this is probably the most important part of what I'm saying to you all is the blue and gold cases. And so this is a core principle of government contracts law. And it basically stipulates that you cannot wait to challenge terms of a solicitation after award, or you waive your right to protest. So many years ago, when I was a baby lawyer, we had a litigation matter where a client was already awarded some work in sub-Saharan Africa doing security assessments for State Department embassy work. And so they use look at the compound, say, here, this is vulnerable, and they kind of did a write-up, and then they sent off to the Department of State. And then a separate contract came out later that was actually the security work for that. And the client bid on that security work. That RFP for the security work had an OCI clause that said if you have the assessment work, you can't do the security work. However, client bid on it and protested when they weren't awarded the contract. And we got hounded in court because of blue and gold, which was if your client wanted to bid on this work, they should have challenged that OCI clause before proposals were due. Now, there are some complicating factors in there, which we kind of argued about, but to no avail. But point being, to the extent that you're considering an RFP, you're going to put your chief business growth officer, your team on it, and you're considering putting all these resources in place. You have to make sure that you challenge terms of the solicitation before proposals are due. Otherwise, you're waiving those rights. And then fast forward 6 months, a year down the line, when the award happens, and we realize, or your lawyers tell you all your best arguments are waived because they're untimely, it becomes a pretty disappointing circumstance. Just make sure you want to have your best foot forward in litigation posture. The last thing is the SBA Office of Hearings and Appeals. And so to the extent you're in the small business side and you're looking at next codes, you can challenge next codes. So there may be situations where the RFP comes out and it's not the primary, or under one next code, but it's not the primary purpose of the work. It's something else. You could challenge that. And some companies are very smart at challenging next codes because, if you're smaller than your best competitor, you could probably push that next code down so they're excluded. Or conversely, if they're, in one area, you should be in the other because you have stronger past performance. You could work with that. All right, Marianne, next slide, please. All right, so yeah, there are some really great ways. So these are sort of the rules, you know, but broadly, you know, play chess, not checkers. Know the rules. Know that everyone from the very top contractors all the way to your competitors know these as well, and so you have to kind of know the game to play it. I'm fortunate to deal with some really bright, intelligent clients, and they use these pre-protests in really creative ways. One thing I do always say is that, you know, the government generally, the vast majority of the time, they want to have a clean RFP. They don't want to have post award protest, and so they're incentivized to iron out all these details, you know, ahead of time, and encourage the Q&A process. So yeah, utilize Q&As. You know, sometimes it helps both sides. However, this is me being a lawyer, to the extent that the government ignores or is vague with their responses, that could be a potential protest ground as well. But in terms of the strategy, you could use the Q&A, you could use pre-award agency level protests to extend submission deadlines. To the extent that you see an RFP out there that may favor the incumbent, that they may have some not proprietary, but information that be useful. Sometimes a site visit would help, and so maybe you get a Q&A that would add a site visit, so you can actually look at, go on base or wherever and see all the you know, widgets that need to be turned, and so that gives you a better opportunity to price correctly. In terms of keeping the rapport with the government, I know sometimes some businesses are reticent to be in a litigation posture against their customer, and I get that. Although large businesses do it all the time and they still maintain good relationships, but blame your lawyers and say, "Oh man, you know, I'd love to bid on this, but my lawyer's telling me there's some real challenges here, and we're going to have to, you know, file something," and that could potentially incentivize the government to really take your concern seriously, but also keep that distance. And so it's the lawyer who's being the more aggressive one, as opposed to the offeror. Again, I think the biggest thing for me, from my lawyer perspective, is timeliness and forum. Like that's the worst, because if you spend tens of thousands or $100,000 on opportunities and you lose your big incumbent contract because you didn't you got tripped on some technicalities, that's tough. So to go back to two of my points. One, for agency protests, again, it's the most informal process. You could file before proposals are due, but say that the government will continue evaluation and they issue a solicitation or an award after you file your protest. You're on notice that the government's not listening to you, and you have 10 days to file a GAO, or you waive your right. So that's why agency protests are a little dangerous. Other circumstances, say you'd filed a submission on an RFP last week, so it's with the government and they issue a solicitation after you submit. So say they do it today, and something you don't like. You have to file within 10 days of that too, because you're on constructive notice. So some clients do what we call a prophylactic protest. They will protest to preserve the right to argue post-award. And the government say, "Okay, we get it. You're not happy. We'll lodge it. And if you're unsuccessful, we can still do that." And so again, please think of those things. But again, the hardest thing is to not have your best arguments because they're untimely. And last piece of advice is to use your size status to your advantage. Like I said before, those market research, the rule of twos are very, very powerful, as is the next code protests. So think of what will put you in the best position to be successful. And with that, I'll I think it's my last slide. Marianne, the next slide, I think this is my questions. Okay. Great. And if you think of anything later, please feel free to ping me. But I've enjoyed speaking. Thank you.
Hey, Shomari, I had a question for you. Sorry,
Yeah.
you were going to ask this. When you said that you need to ensure the government has followed the rule of two, how in the world, unless you convinced one of your friends who owns a company to actually respond to the RFI, so you know for a fact there was another small business that submitted to that particular RFI, how would you be able to be sure, unless you did a full discovery, that they in fact didn't follow the rule of two? And then with the new FAR 2.0 that's coming along, do you think that's the rule of two is gonna last?
Yeah, well, great question. So, yeah, that's one of the benefits of pre-award protest, right? So you could actually get some of the discovery to see if they actually did follow market research, or you get a quick corrective action, which sometimes happens as well. It's like, oh, you caught me, you know. But so far, you know, these days, and I get the current climate we're in, we get pings every few days. Hey, are the current small business regulations still in place for primes, or do I do my subcontracting plan? Yeah, there will be changes, but so far, you know, we tell folks, and the government is operating as normal. But yeah, there are going to be some changes. But for now, yeah, that's what's in the regs. But to your question, yeah, FOIA sometimes are helpful, but the immediate thing would be the pre-award protest to see what exactly the government did to make its determination.
Thanks, Shamari.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks, Shamari. Really great insight there.
Yeah.
Alexa, I think you're up.
All right, hi friends. Super excited to talk about this. First, I'm gonna go back to one of the things that AO had mentioned about small businesses not wanting to respond to RFIs. I have to say that I really believe it is your job, even as a large business, as a small business. If the contracting officers are going to ask a question, it is industry's job to show up and give them a good answer. And then back to what Shamari was saying, if the question's a bad question, then do something about it. But sitting on the outside complaining about how you submit RFIs into a black hole, especially with like all the AI tools, which is one of the topics I'm going to talk about, there's no excuse. We need to show up big, and we need to do the best job possible that we possibly can to help our COs and our KOs out. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about is strategery, which is like my favorite word. I used to work with this guy that used to say that all the time. It used to make me laugh. And it really is to create a good step review process, one that's repeatable, one that matches where your company is today, but one that can grow and scale with you as your company grows and scales. So whatever your step review process is, it should cover the four things. Number one, what is your win strategy and what is your P-win, which actually equals can we win? And this is where you need to get really like honest with yourself. If the customer doesn't know who you are, this is not your deal. Like, I don't even care if it's an RFI stage. Like maybe if it's like in a pre, that's fine. And then it's your job to go and get that customer to know who you are, who your customer is, why should they trust you, then build that rapport and understand the mission and get in there with the program people, like all of that stuff. We all know our jobs, right? But ultimately, like the first question is, can we win? The second thing is, what has the customer engagement been? And that is actually, will we win? Because ultimately, if the customer doesn't know who you are, unless there's a couple agencies out there, I'm not going to throw them under the bus. There's a couple of them where they might actually they open up the price, and then they're going to be like, okay, who's the lowest? And then they're going to open up the technical on the lowest. And if it's good to go, good to go. There's a few agencies out there like that, but by and large, they want to know who they're selling to. Teaming and capability is like, how are we going to win? Like, can we win by ourselves? Do we need to sub? Should we sub? How are we going to do this? And then, of course, the competitive landscape is who else is out there. So I used to build out a lot of black hat slides, and every time I would go back to who actually won and were they even on my slide deck? And if they weren't, where did I drop the ball? How did I miss the fact that this gigantic company came out of the blue and they weren't even on my competitive list? Then like, how was I even in the realm of possibility of knowing what I was talking about, right? I used to beat myself up as a young capture manager all the time about that. So like having your competitive landscape kind of nailed down is key. So if you don't have a current step review process, start here. 4 questions. What's the win strategy and what's our P-win? What is our customer engagement? What is our teaming and capability plan? And what is our competitive landscape? I'm going to say one more thing from a strategery, from an overall company, right? You're going to want to have some goals of the company. So then you should ask yourself, should we win this? If we did win this, is this the kind of work we want to be known for? So for example, right now in today's, I would say rough climate, the NAICS code 541, 512 is good. 541, 611, management consulting, everybody's actually like diving off of that, right? So like, if you don't want to build a consulting company, management consulting company, then you probably are going to not want to be bidding things in that 541, 611 NAICS code set. But that takes strategy. It takes understanding as a company where you want to be 5 years and working backwards. If you haven't had those strategy sessions with your leaders and really had those plans, then you're not going to be able to answer that question. Should we? What does smart growth look like? Who do we want to be when we grow up? And so that's kind of like part of the step review process that should be done earlier. And then also consider your step review process something that will change as the company grows. How many times do you meet before the RFP drops, and who's in those meetings, and who signs off from like a yes, thumbs up, we're going to do this. So always be constantly thinking about what's going to move that to be faster. In my opinion, it should be your growth person, and your growth team should encompass your BD people, your capture people, and your proposal ops people. And that should be your growth function. And it should be the job of your chief growth officer or your lead growth person to make sure that your step review process matches your plan and your company growth. Okay, next slide. All right, what do I do 12 to 18 months? Where do I go? So, if you know me at all, you know that I've been a G2X customer for many, many years, probably way back when most people hadn't even heard of it. And why do I love it so much? I love it because I think it's very strategic to get out early in front of government folks that might have moved jobs, industry folks that moved jobs. It's important to be at events, first, foremost, first in the room, like right when the panel gets over, first in line to meet the speakers, right? And then, I have to tell you guys a quick story. I was doing a step review for a big deal at my last company, and the CEO said, if you can get a relationship with the customer at this conference, I'll go ahead and say yes to this. And I was like, okay, challenge accepted, right? So going to conferences, which conferences should I go to? Who's winning work in this agency, and who could I potentially partner with? Because if your partners don't bring you access and influence, then you shouldn't have them on your team. It's either access, influence, or capability that you don't have within your company. Those are the only 3 reasons you should be teaming, right? And if you are being a teaming partner to somebody else, you should bring one of those 3 things: access, influence, or capability. And then in very rare circumstances, like a set-aside status, right? So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and continue down here, but ultimately you wanna be really close with your customers, and you also want to prepare your team. So you want to make sure that your key personnel are lined up. My favorite way to do key personnel is to select my favorite PMs within the company and have them help me in the blue teams. Have them help put their team together. Have them run some of those proposal meetings, because you want their buy-in. What if there's orals? There usually is orals, right? So you just want to have your key personnel really close to you. So that way, if the customer's like, hey, Alexa, can you guys hop on a meeting? Yeah, sure. Oh, by the way, let me introduce, Yelena, who's going to be bid key PM, right? Imagine the power of that in a pre-solicitation meeting. They would be like, oh, dang, okay, cool. Wow, they're really like ahead of it, right? I already talked a little bit about understanding the competitive landscape. Your differentiators are definitely a thing. Your win strategy, I think, has to also include pricing. So, if you don't have a price to win or a price to play or a price to like whatever else is out there, then you really have to kind of consider the green team before it's green team time. So like, what is your approach going to be? Are you going to be tech forward, price heavy, price low, tech low? So like you have all these variables that kind of go into it. But if you don't start preparing 12 months in advance, and you only prepare once the RFP drops, then you're already kind of behind the 8 ball on that. And then when it comes to step reviews, I can't tell you how many times I had to pull out of like a deal, like as a prime, because the CEO was like, this didn't go through the due process, and I'm not gonna commit, to going forward with this whole thing. This was back a couple companies ago when I was just out there like pirate shipping. So the more, the more you grow as a capture manager and as a bid strategist, you kind of think about these things. And then, of course, you want to be able to track the external changes and stay aware of any shifts in the acquisition strategy. There was something I saw today on sam.gov that actually, yep. Okay, I'm gonna answer that question, Tanya, because that's a good question. But you guys are not gonna believe what happened. Listen to this. There was a random SAM link that I was clicking into. In the next slide, you're gonna see why I was clicking into it. And it basically said that they're moving this solicitation onto T4NG. Why does that matter? Why do we care? Why? Because the government said all solicitations and acquisitions are moving to GSA. But the VA said, no, we're not. Today, we're moving this to T4 and it's moving forward. So that was like gigantic news, but nobody's talking about it unless you're sleeping on SAM, which maybe I am on SAM all the time. But that kind of thing, like just staying in the know that fast on things. And that's why G2X is such a powerful tool, because we'll tell you in your inbox tomorrow morning or even today, if you have a saved search setup, that the VA's strategy is changing and that they are going to move forward with T4 and G. Not only that, but probably actually T4 and G too. Who knows, right? The last one, boost visibility and credibility, increase your presence and market leadership and thought leadership. Okay, so before I talk about that, I'm going to answer Tanya's question because I think it's a good one. With a lot of government customers not communicating, how do you plan your events if you're not sure who's going to attend? A lot of speakers will be listed as attending, but then they don't show up. Yeah, this is like a 2025 like conundrum, right? A lot of government is feeling very iffy about showing up. And I think Brittany Jenkins can probably speak to this a little bit more since she is in the government currently. But this is what I would say, show up anyway. Because one of the 3 pivots that I've been doing a lot of talking about in how to survive and build a sustainable growth organization outside of the way that things have been done typically is to pivot from prime contracting to subcontracting. And I think if you really fired up your subcontracting and really got out there and started working with the big companies outside of the systems integrators, so we're talking like some of the big defense contractors, and kind of getting in with those folks, then I feel like you could really bring in another stream of revenue that's going to be very valuable during this time. So show up anyway. Show up to them all. Vets 25, if you're not there, I don't know what to tell you. That's going to be a hell of a conference. So, okay, next slide. All right, one of the things I really wanted to talk to you guys about today is using AI. And I'm going to do this super fast because I don't want to take up all of Brittany's time. So, in fact, I might not even actually go to it. I'm just going to talk to it because if I went to it, I'm going to take too much time. So if you guys take a look at the middle of the screen, g2exchange.com, I want to let you know that if you go to this website and put a / and paste any SAM link out there into this tool, it's going to pop up and say, which documents would you like me to read? And one of the pro tips is only select PDFs because AI does a terrible job reading Excels. That's even facts today. So select all the PDFs, and then it's going to basically pop up an AI super trained on shredding RFIs. So the link, if you can see my screen, g2exchange.com, I'll type it in here as well. g2exchange.com. So do that and then put a / and then any SAM link that you want. It's going to pop up an RFI, RFP shredder. So one thing before I hand it to Brittany, I just want to say that why would you not use this shredder when you're building out your questions? And you say, hey, give me the page number, section number, and give me 5 questions that are going to pivot this small business. And you're going to get your questions that are going to help the government shape its small business that just are incredible questions. With the page number, section number, it's going to take your time and make it way easier. So please do check that out. It's called Lumen. And by the way, it's free. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Brittany. Thank you for listening, everybody.
All right, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. If you cannot, someone please let me know. Listen, there was a lot of great information already shared. So for the sake of time, I don't intend to, I guess, repeat some of the goodness that I've already heard. One point I did want to make to something that Alexa mentioned about, you've got a lot of what we call rebadging, where you can have a prior government person that has retired or just decided to leave the government and go through the industry side. Recently, something I just want you to be mindful of when you do that. That is a very valuable tool to you, right? But we want to be mindful of, and I know our attorneys can appreciate this. You want to be mindful of having someone, real world example. We had a requirement where the government person that had left us, they did their, requirements to legal to say, yes, I'm leaving, I'm going to work for a contractor. But every other vendor in the area knew that that person left our particular organization and, went to industry. And so there were a mountain of protests just because of the perception that there were still connections from that person to others inside the government. And they just automatically made the assumption that that person was still communicating, with PMs and of the sort. May or may not have been the case. I can't speak to that. But what I would have recommended to that company, just to not even have the perception of an OCI, organizational conflict of interest, I wouldn't have had that person be the face or the person sending the proposals and the requirements to the government. Not saying don't have them as part of your company and have them as a valuable asset to you, because that is very, very valuable. And I can definitely see why that would be. But just to keep yourself out of that, is there something, happening that should not be happening? Maybe have them in your company, have them working in the background, giving you whatever it is that you feel like is that benefit to you. But I probably wouldn't have them be the person sending the emails and things of that nature, or the face of the company at that time. You just want to be careful with stuff like that. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there for you to think about those things, because perception is reality, right? So to the slide. So from my perspective as the government person on the panel, I just wanted to talk through some of the things that I've seen as challenges for our industry partners when they are preparing their proposals. And a lot of this I get because I actually talk to my industry partners, especially my small businesses, before, obviously not during the time frame when we can't talk, but even after a solicitation has, already been done, the requirement has already been met, later on, debriefings, whatever. I try to give really meaningful feedback, like, hey, don't do that again, or hey, had you not done this, that, within the realms of integrity in where I can. So this is where a lot of this comes from. So inconsistent RFP structure, that is feedback that I get often from industry partners. And what I will say is there are a lot of agencies, a lot of organizations, and not all RFPs are going to look the same. You can be within my office and have 5 different PCOs who have 5 different RFPs that are structured 5 different ways, right? So I don't know that we can get around that, but what I would recommend for you is get yourselves very well versed in what those requirements of a solicitation are, or have you a good contracts person on your team that knows, you got to pay attention to, what the font requirements are, what the page count requirements are, all of that stuff. But don't take for granted that they're all going to include the same things. Actually read the RFP. They're not standard across the board in terms of what that particular team may require or want to see from you. So make sure you're reading it. One thing I can think of is create you a template. I've seen different teams where they take the RFP and then they create a template that directly mirrors or marries up with what the RFP is asking for, to ensure that you're not missing anything within, the solicitation document. That can be very beneficial to make sure you're answering all the relevant parts of the solicitation. You've got unclear and ambiguous or outdated requirements. Listen, read the requirement. I know for us, we have a lot of legacy systems and they're in sustainment, and essentially we're doing the same thing all the time. But sometimes the requirement changes. So don't take for granted that, oh, this is the same requirement that I did on 3 years ago. Make sure you actually read the requirement, know what the requirement is, have a good grasp and understanding on what the government is asking of you. Someone mentioned about Q&As and drafts. Properly utilize those. The time to talk to the government is before the solicitation hits the street. So any opportunity you have to get feedback, to say, hey, this is crap. Hey, you guys, are not doing yourselves any favors. This PWS hasn't been updated in the last 10 years since I've been bidding on that. Respectfully, having a way to identify those types of things and relay that information to the government teams is very critical. The earlier you give us the feedback, the sooner we can implement that into the finals, going from draft to final, and it could possibly save an amendment. You guys do not like amendments. Well, sometimes when we have Q&As, we don't get meaningful information. We'll get questions like, hey, can we change the font size to 13? No. Or it'll be something that, is not the most relevant thing for you to ask. Hey, is the incumbent performing well? I can't tell you that. So you wasted an opportunity or a question to really give me some feedback to say, hey, this right here is going to prohibit industry from being able to give you what you really need because of X, because of Y. Being very specific about things that we really should go and take another look at is what you should be providing while we can still have that conversation. Don't wait until protest to say, you know what, had you guys done this, we could have done that. Protest is obviously a tool for you guys. I'm not a protest risk adverse PCO because I do what I say I'm going to do in my solicitation. And if a protest happens, it happens. There's nothing you can do about that. But I think industry doesn't always recognize the power that they have in helping to formulate the government's requirement in a better way while utilizing that time before that period where we just can't talk. For communication, make sure that you guys are ensuring yourselves of what your timelines are, when the requirements are coming out, looking at SAM and the various platforms early and often. A lack of planning is not a reason that you're going to get a PCO to extend, time frames. But on the flip side, the government can also do a better job of not putting, 3 or 4 day or 1 week turnarounds on requirements. Those are things when you have your industry days, or if you have that PCO that you have a good relationship with, have that conversation with them. Let them know how that impacts you as industry, because we're government. A lot of us have never been on the industry side or have never had conversations with industry to know how that impacts your bottom line or your business decision as to whether or not you're going to bid on something, because the turnaround time is just taxing on your resources or things of that nature. Next slide. Couple other things. Someone already touched on it. Building relationships, yes. Building those relationships, visiting the sites, knowing who your small business directors are at the various agencies is important. Knowing who to meet with. Sometimes the PCO is not the person that you need to meet with. Sometimes it's the program manager with the PCO possibly there to supplement, because the program managers know the requirement. Everybody always wants to get in front of the CO, but sometimes is that who you need to be in front of while you can talk to who you want to talk to. Now, as a PCO, I'm going to want to be there with my customer, but you really want to talk to their requirements owner so that you can either influence, what that requirement should look like, or really ask those questions that you really need. Sorry, I'm running out of time. I had a couple of nuggets I wanted to hit, but you all can obviously reach out to me at any time. One of the things that I really want to highlight is the limited access to past performance data. Past performance or past experience is oftentimes one of the criteria that are utilized. And I just know from friends that I know that own companies, a lot of times you guys are scrambling trying to figure out what past performance or experience do I have that fits this. Go ahead and create you a repository and put it in buckets of things that you guys specialize in. If it's janitorial, if it's IT, if it's this or that. So when that RFP comes around and you have that short turnaround time, you're not scrambling trying to figure out, do I need to partner? Do I have this past experience? Is it relevant enough? Is it recent enough? Create you some repositories or spreadsheets of information and separate it by NAICS codes or by the different types of requirements so that you can more readily and easily get to your information and know what information you can use to bid. Am I out of time? I know it's 1 o'clock.
You can talk a little bit longer if you have the time, Brittany. This is recorded, so if anybody has to drop off, we're sending you guys the recording, so you'll have it.
Got you. Okay, so that was a really big thing about the past performance data. Just a tidbit of something you may want to try. And also, I would say if you're going to reach out for teaming partners, make sure your teaming partner is going to help propel you and not bring you down. Just because someone has these size standards or the specific tools, or maybe they have that expensive CMMC and all of that, that may or may not hurt you or harm you. So make sure you're doing your research on the people that you decide to team with and ensure that it is something that is going to help propel you to where you're trying to go and not hurt you. Evaluation criteria and uncertainty. This is where the meaningful Q&As come into play, right? That goes back to my point of when you have that Q&A period, really hone in on the things that are really critical, not font sizes, not, you know, some of the other things that we say may get you thrown out. I can't tell you that I've ever scanned someone's proposal to see if it's 12 or if it's 11. But I do know if I tell you that a cross-reference matrix will be used and you have to tell me where in your proposal I can find your response to cutting the grass. And if you don't do that, I'm not going to read it. Well, those are the types of things you need to hone in on, because you can have an entire proposal not read because you just didn't see or you didn't follow the instructions of the RFP. So make sure you're clear on what the requirements are, and make sure you're clear on how you're being evaluated. If it's not making sense to you in the draft, it's not going to make sense to you in the final, and then you're going to protest. Well, there was ample time before that to have the conversations, to have that PCO or have that industry day meeting to really help you understand, okay, what is the basis of award and how do I get to A, B, and C, and make sure that you understand it before you make a business decision to say that you're going to bid or not. Staying up to date on changing policies. I saw someone put in the chat about, you know, FAR 2.0. We're getting the same information. As the policy chief for my organization, I sit in a lot of those meetings where a lot of that sausage is being made. A lot of it I can't say, but hold on tight because we're in for a ride. A lot of it isn't making sense. I wish I could give you some really good aha information about that. But what I do know is they are trying to ensure that if it's regulatory, if it is backed by like a CFR for you small business folks, that information, from what I'm understanding, is not expected to be changed. So take that for whatever you will. If there are certain things in the FAR that is backed by statutory guidance, like a CFR such and such, and I'm not being specific for a reason, but if you go do your research and see what things related to small businesses are backed by CFRs, those are the type of regulatory things that I'm hearing that are not supposed to be affected. So I'll just say that. Let's see. The other last thing that I will say is on the building the relationship, just going back for a minute, make sure you're doing your homework on your various agencies. Make sure you don't take a meeting with a PCO or a program manager and they do IT and you have a capability statement that's about janitorial services. That was a complete waste of your time and theirs. Make sure you do the research. Make sure if you come and you want to have a meeting with me, you know what Business and Enterprise Systems does. You know what types of services that we procure. You've at least gone out to our site to read, you know, our 18-month forecast to see what types of requirements we have coming out. Make sure you do that. Have multiple capability briefs. That is something I recommend when I mentor or advise small businesses. If you dib and dabble in different types of arenas, have different types of capability statements so that when you're going to talk to the IT folks, you can give them IT information. When you're going to talk to switchboard and those types of things, that you have that information. I don't want to have to weed through your capability brief to see where I fit, or how can I contact you, or what vehicles are you on, what contract numbers can I look up to see what the scope of work that you've done. Make it easy for me. That big 3/4 of the page where the CEO's picture is there, very nice looking CEOs doesn't help me. Give the information that I really need. Have someone who's willing to take the time to review your capability brief. Ask somebody to look at it. I actually look at them, and I'll actually give you real-time advice about it. I'll tell you what will go in a folder, and I'll tell you what I'll probably throw away, and be very honest with you about it and tell you why. Not every CEO is going to do that. Not every CEO is going to take the time. Not every CEO is going to care. But these are just some of the things that I've encountered. You can go to the next slide. It's just a summary of the things that I said. But I do think these are some of the tips from a contracting officer perspective that I think will help you. Apologies, I didn't have more time to give you more examples, but I'm sure that, you know, we will have more opportunities such as this to give information. They have my contact information. If you guys have any questions that we can't get to now, hopefully this was helpful. And that's it for me, unless you guys have any questions. None, I think.
Thank you so much, Brittany, and thank you to the rest of the panel, Alexa, Shamari, and also Marianne for coordinating this. Again, it's really, really meaningful to add value to the community, especially being a part of NCMA. Again, huge shout out to the G2X team. Huge shout out to NCMA River Region, Metro Maryland, and of course, NCMA Atlanta. It's been a pleasure having this event, and hope to see you guys on the next one. Thank you.